I want to hear cannons. Three-step drop, goes on the end zone. Caught ball, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans reaches up with one hand and grabs it in. Here they go again. Timbo mode, dropping the throw. Winston out again, throws to the left.
Cannon Fire Podcast, brother. You ain't listening, and you're missing out. Woo!
And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me, my good buddy and co-host from BucsNation.com, Mr. Evan Wanish. And we come to you today with some Tampa Bay Buccaneer news. You know, honestly, I thought our post-Super Bowl break would be a little more graceful than it was. Just took a little bit of time off, and then 1 week turned into two, turned into three. But regardless, we are back here today with some positive updates on the red and pewter Pirates that we all love. How we doing, guys, in the chat really quickly? Mikey says, is this live? Yes, sir, we are live. We are here in the flesh. Well, not really in the flesh, but coming to you live over the power of the internet. Bucs Skull Gang in the house as well. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the pod. Evan, long time no talk, buddy. How you doing?
Doing quite well. The Buccaneers are also doing better because now, after a long process, which I think frustrated a lot of fans, after a long process, they finally hired someone. So at least they finally hired someone, and Bucs Skull Gang is asking our takes on the hire, and that's what this podcast is for. So we're gonna get into all that very shortly.
So let's go ahead and get into it. The age-old question for a lot of Bucs fans over the last month and a half is who is going to be the
I think so. Yeah. We haven't had him confirm it yet, but maybe we can get some confirmation on that. But yeah, I do believe Canales. I believe it's Dave Canales. That's what I've been rolling with. That's what I've heard multiple people roll with. So I'm pretty sure that that's right.
So Dave Canales is a young guy, obviously. That's going to be hot on this market, looking for new potential coordinators and head coaches in the NFL. Spent all of his time in the NFL coaching with Seattle and Pete Carroll. I believe he had a year at USC with Pete Carroll on that staff before he took the Seattle job in 2010. While in Seattle, he did some receiver. He worked as a receivers coach. Spent some time as the quarterbacks coach. I believe he switched over 2017 or 2018. Spent a little more time as the pass game coordinator, and then finally went back to being just a quarterback coach in 2022. And what did we see from him in 2022? But help him turn around the NFL's comeback player of the year in Geno Smith, who threw 4,200 yards, 30 touchdowns to a fair amount of interceptions. But that type of production from a guy like Geno Smith made him a household name in 2022, and not a lot of coaches could say that they had done that in years prior. So I think this is an underrated hire. You know, Canales wasn't really a guy that we were talking about beforehand. All of the sexy names started to go one by one. You know, we had tied Todd Monken to the Bucs. Bill O'Brien kind of got settled pretty quickly after that podcast once he ended up back in New England. A couple of other names that we had mentioned, but Canales is the guy, and I really, really like the hire the more that you learn about this guy. What do you think, Evan?
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, he didn't single-handedly turn around Geno Smith, but hey, I mean, he definitely played a role, and Geno Smith was always very supportive of him, and I think that's important. So, and not to mention just Geno Smith, but this guy coached Russell Wilson for his entire career in Seattle when he was in Seattle, and when he had honestly his best years. So, he's seen good quarterback play, and I think the biggest thing, he's seen a lot of winning. The Seahawks have not really lost much over the past, 2010s, basically. Obviously, they won a Super Bowl. They went to another. They have not lost a lot of games. They've never been a bottom five team, ever since Pete Carroll really took over. So, he knows what winning sort of looks like. He knows how winning offense is done. And, And I think that could rub off well on some of the Buccaneers. Not that this group doesn't know how to win. I mean, they're 2-3 years removed from a Super Bowl, so obviously like they know how to win. I just think it helps having that fresh voice that also knows how to win. And is it a risk? Yeah, I mean it is. He's never been a play caller, so you don't know what you're gonna get. But at the same time, everybody's got to start somewhere. Like you got to start somewhere, and um, the best head coaches, like they didn't start off as these great play callers or whatever. So a team took a chance on them and it worked out. So I think you need to be given that opportunity in order to be able to succeed. And I think now we're going to see if he can do it. Obviously, it's a critical year for, I mean, not just him, but I would say even more so for Todd Bowles. I mean, this is people wondered why they sort of waited so long to hire someone and interviewed 10 different candidates and this and that, and brought Dan Pitcher in for a second interview, Thomas Brown in for a second interview. I just think Todd Bowles and Jason Light, one, okay, it was probably a little bit difficult to find one because this isn't an ideal situation. There are many other better situations out there. But also, I think they knew they needed to get the hire right, and I don't think they wanted to rush it per se. So, now hopefully they do get the hire right, and hopefully Canales can just improve the offense enough, and because I mean, the future of Todd Bowles in Tampa Bay and maybe even Jason Light might depend on it. Honestly, I mean, I know it's a lot of pressure to put on a guy who's a first-year play caller, but this offense needs to be better, or else there could be a lot of changes coming. I mean, we've talked about how the Bucs aren't going to be tanking in 2023, but I mean, could they be bad? Sure, things could turn sideways. And if they do, there's going to be a lot of changes. So there's a lot of pressure on Canales, on Todd Bowles to get this right. And I think this is just the first step in a pretty important offseason for them.
Yeah, obviously the pressure's on for this entire coaching staff. Todd Bowles, Canales coming into this new role as offensive coordinator. But I think something that, some people may need to understand, and I don't know if we've quite had this conversation on the pod yet. People were asking questions about, just like you had brought up, why are the Bucs interviewing 10, 11 guys for their offensive coordinator position? And why does it seem like none of them can be the guy? Especially when you heard reports of, Dan Pitcher interviewed twice, decided to stay in Cincinnati. You heard Scott Reynolds of Pewter Report say Todd Monken turned down the Bucs to go be OC for Baltimore. So I think a concept that not a lot of people are going to like, but listen, if you've been listening to this show long enough, we've always kept it straight with you guys. Are the Bucs going to suck this year? No, but I think it's an interesting spot for this coaching staff to be in because they know they're probably not going to have, projected to be competing for a Super Bowl like they have in previous seasons. So the pressure is on, but it's like the way that I would describe this season coming up is the Bucs are going to pay for it. They're going to pay for everything that they have done for the last 2-3 years. That sounds so heinous. That makes it sound terrible. But, the fact of the matter is for the Bucs to field the team the way that they have the last 3 seasons, they went all in to get Tom Brady. They went all in to bring Rob Gronkowski to Tampa. They went all in to sign Antonio Brown midseason. They brought these guys in and they put together a damn good football team. But we knew eventually, they're going to be kicking the can down the road for 2-3 years, and then eventually they're going to have to pay for it. Well, with Tom Brady's decision to go ahead and file his retirement papers with the NFL and NFLPA before June 1st, the Bucs are literally going to have to pay for it. Now, $35 million in dead cap. They're still going to have to do some gymnastics to get back over the cap, or under the cap, excuse me. But I mean, it is what it is. We kind of knew this day was coming, right? And at the end of the day, if you're Todd Bowles and you're all the other coaches on this roster, you're going to field the best team you can. Because if you're within the organization, if you're Jason Light, Todd Bowles, and all those other guys, you still feel like this roster can put together a winning football season, right? Like, I think if the Bucs play their cards right, they could still win the NFC South when it's all said and done, because I think that's going to come down to whoever just gets the best quarterback when it's at the end of the day. But there's a lot of things the Bucs can do right in 2023 to have success. And while there is a lot of pressure on the things that they can certainly do wrong. I think how they engage free agency, how they engage getting back under the cap, and ultimately how they engage their next potential franchise quarterback is going to tell us a lot. But I mean, what are your thoughts? I try to tell people that this is going to be the year the Bucs are going to take it on the chin, and it's starting to seem more and more like that's the case, especially since they are going to be in a much better cap position in 2024. But there's going to be some tough cuts. And it might be a lackluster free agency this year compared to what we have seen, but the Bucs are still going to try and do their best to win because these guys are coaching for their jobs.
Yeah. That last line right there was it. Because if they don't win, Todd Bowles ain't going to be here much longer. So I would say they probably need to win at least 7 games. I would think for the Glazers to feel comfortable with keeping Todd Bowles, and if that's I don't think Jason Light is completely safe either. I think he's more safe than Todd Bowles, but I don't think he's completely safe. So take it on the chin this year. It's a tough balance because it's going to be more difficult to field a playoff team, but at the same time, you're going to try your best to do that. And it's not impossible. It's just more difficult. And I do think that one of the things internally that you could have, automatically improved without having any, outside thing is offensive coordinator. And hopefully they have figured that out. I think that's a huge key because if they figure that out, and if Canales hits, then I think you could be seeing. Because here's the thing, I've seen a lot of people say, "Oh, well, Dave Canales can be the head coach after Bowles gets fired," and I go, "Look, if Bowles gets fired, that likely means that Canales' offense didn't work because I trust Todd Bowles as a defensive mind enough to, while I think they're going to lose some pieces on defense and it's going to be a little bit tough to replace it, you're probably going to have to replace it with younger guys who may be trying to learn the game. I still trust them enough to field a somewhat decent defense. And the offense was so bad last year, and the defense really kept them in a lot of games. That I think if the offense is good enough to get Canales head coaching buzz, that means that the Bucs won a lot more games than people thought, and Bowles ain't going anywhere. But if the Bucs only win 4 games, that's likely a sign that Canales' offense was pretty much no different. They have a worse quarterback under center than Tom Brady, and that's the result. So I'm not sure why people are like, "Oh, he's going to be the head coach." No, like that's not likely the case if he struggles. And somebody brought up to me the Lovie Smith Dirk Cutter thing. That was different. Lovie Smith's defense was pretty bad. And I trust Todd Bowles as a defensive mind more than I trust Lovie Smith's defense.
Yeah, and I think at this point you have to trust Todd Bowles' experience as a head coach more than you trust a guy like Canales. I think it's incredibly short-sighted for anyone to already be talking about, the future of Canales in Tampa with Todd Bowles not in the picture. That's just it. Come on now. Like, you're wasting your time. It's a hypothetical discussion at this rate. They're going to focus on one season, one game at a time. And as of 2023, which we're still 6 months away from. I mean, we're 2 months into 2023, the calendar year, but the NFL season does not start until September. So we're going to have plenty to talk about between now and then. But, with Canales and the offensive coordinator, with that question being answered, the next $1 million question I wanted to cover here today was obviously going to be the quarterback situation, because we really haven't gotten any inkling aside from a couple reports that say, oh, the Bucs may have some interest in this guy. They could be expected to have interest in this guy. Maybe they want to pursue on this guy. But I want to talk today with you. I kind of want to run down the list. The Bucs have 3 options at what they want to do with quarterback for the 23 season. They can either look at in-house options, like Kyle Trask, Florida Gator legend, make him QB1, maybe bring in a cheap veteran to be some competition come training camp, and we'll see what happens week 1. They could potentially draft somebody. That doesn't seem very likely. And I guess I kind of combined, 1 and 2 of their options as far as Kyle Trask and signing a veteran. I think Kyle Trask is going to be on the roster regardless in 2023, but depending on the veteran they sign, is he going to be on the roster as QB1, QB2, or even QB3 if a guy like Blaine Gabbert decides to come back and the Bucs want him back? Let's talk about some names, all right? And I just want to get your thoughts. We'll talk about the scenario of how the Bucs can obviously end up with these particular names, but first and foremost, here's a name not a lot of people are talking about, and it is the veteran cheap free agent route. That is former Carolina Panther, Cleveland Brown, number 1 overall pick, Baker Mayfield in the red and pewter. How do you think that would go over? Probably not well, right?
So here's my thing, and real quick, Cody in the chat, I'm not frozen. I just can't contain my excitement for Dave Canales. So that is
Just
me.
that big cheese and face we all know and
Yes,
love.
yes. I was so excited when Byron Leftwich got fired, and now I'm equally excited for this hiring. So, um, eh, here's the thing, and why I'm more in on Baker now than I was beforehand because we just saw the influence that Canales might have had with Geno Smith. It's a very similar situation. I don't think Baker's going to cost a ton. Look, he's going to be on this is going to be his 4th team in a year. Like he was this year at this point last year, he was still on the Browns. He was still on the Cleveland Browns, believe it or not. And I'm more intrigued by Baker now because if Canales can turn around another pretty high draft pick, I mean, this was a former number 1 overall draft pick. There's talent there. And he's won in the NFL, not a ton, but he has won. It's not like the Browns were terrible every year with him. I just think there could be a little bit more there. And is there more of a risk? I do, because I think his lows are pretty low. But I also think if you unlock some potential, you have the potential to find your quarterback for the next 3-4 years. And then you don't have to invest draft capital in it right now. You can focus on improving the rest of the team. So I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think it might be worth the chance.
Sticking with the free agent conversation, a guy that has been tied to Tampa Bay before, especially during the Brady years for some reason, but I would say even before that. I know the Bucs were pretty deeply involved with Jameis Winston, but there would always be some quarterback talk, some murmurs around the end of the season. But the guy that I wanted to talk about, another potential free agent, Jimmy Garoppolo, the former San Francisco 49ers. I honestly, I'll give my take on this one first. One seems to be he would be a little more of, a pricey option for Tampa Bay. I don't feel like it would be impossible, but I think you would have to definitely make some more cuts than you would be comfortable with and sacrifice some money in other places. But, to the argument of people that say Jimmy G wins, Brock Purdy also won in that same system. We watched it happen. And if it wasn't for that collapse in the playoffs, who knows how that game would have gone in the long run. But with Jimmy G, man, I feel like, maybe Canales can bring another fold into this offense that allows Jimmy to work, but I don't know. I just think it would be a lot more of the same of what we saw this year. Like I don't know, man. What do you think on Jimmy G?
Yeah, I think he's going to be first off, let me just ask if it's likely or not. I don't think it's as likely. I think he's going to be a bit more expensive. No, I mean, Mike Garafolo, has said that the Buccaneers will have interest in him, but he also noted that he might be a little too expensive, which I think would be the case. So, yeah, I wouldn't be in favor of it just because, like you said, that San Francisco offense, look, I know it's not plug and play, but you still need to be a decent quarterback. It's not like you can throw anybody in there. But when Brock Purdy, a 7th-round pick, is playing that well, that's clearly a sign that it's more about the coaching staff and the team around you than it is the quarterback. And if you look at Jimmy Garoppolo's stats in the playoffs, it's not very good. So he's been really carried by his team around him in the playoffs. That Super Bowl, he was up and down. If he makes that throw to Emmanuel Sanders, they might win it. He missed the throw. So, I mean, that's a clutch moment right there. NFC Championship game last year against LA, he didn't play that well. So, I don't think that would be the smartest route. And to me, because signing a guy like him would just mean that you're probably kicking the can down the road a little bit. Not too much, not too crazy, but you're going to have to kick the can down the road a little bit. And is
It
Jimmy
limits
Garoppolo
it limits
is he
what you can
worth
do
it?
elsewhere.
Yeah, and is he worth that? Like Tom Brady, that's one thing. If you can sign Lamar Jackson, that's another. But like, is Jimmy Garoppolo worth that? Probably not. So I don't. Well, I don't think it's likely. So I don't think we'll have to really face it. I also wouldn't, if I were the Tampa front office, I would not personally suggest that.
Couple of free agents from the NFC East I want to put on the slate for you. Our buddy
Well,
Corey.
I think G Vegas is a little bit ahead of you there in the chat. I think he's reading your mind there.
Yeah.
Of one guy you're gonna name.
Well, certainly one guy, but Corey Fleming had the other one first, and it really got me thinking. A name that absolutely nobody has brought up, but we know that. We know he's a competitor. That's for sure what we know about the guy.
And I think Bucs fans are familiar.
Yeah. Probably played his best career game against Tampa Bay in the playoffs all the way back in 2020. Crazy that it feels like it was almost 3 years ago now.
It was
Taylor Heineke. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I wouldn't hate it. I really wouldn't. He's gonna be cheap.
And now, not to interrupt you, but how old is he? He's got to be like
30?
late 20s, right?
I think he's 29 or 30. Yeah. So he's gonna be cheaper. He's not gonna cost a ton, and just he seems like a dude that everybody in the locker room loves. Taylor Heineke is 29. So yeah, he's 29. Let's see what he'll be week 1. Okay, he's about to turn 30. So obviously this isn't a long-term option, and honestly, most of these guys we're going to talk about are probably not long-term options. As Cody Haynes says, my favorite ventriloquist, Evan Wanish. Thank you very much. I've been really studying, honing my craft for the past few years. I'm glad to be able to put on full display here.
You used to do it a bunch back in the day.
I used to do it. Yeah. Me and Jeff Dunham would do it on the road. And then I got too busy and I had to let him go. So he ran with my idea, basically.
If you go to some of the older video podcasts here on YouTube, you could probably find some of Evan, if not both of us, sitting there doing the ventriloquist act.
Yeah. So yeah, I wouldn't hate Taylor Heineke. I think and he plays like he's got a chip on his shoulder, man. This guy was in the XFL playing for the St. Louis Battlehawks. Then he gets signed to Washington. And nobody gives him a shot, and he plays well. He plays well. He was the only team in the regular season. Now I know he didn't do a ton, but he played well enough to beat the Eagles with Jalen Hurts in the starting lineup in the regular season. The only team in the regular season to do that. And I think it says something about him. Like I said, I think that people rally around this guy and they genuinely like him. And I think that's important. Whether it's an underdog story or not, I don't know how likely it is. I have no idea, but I do think that a guy like Heineke can certainly be serviceable. And if you want just competition for Trask, if you want to maybe give Trask a shot to earn a starting job, but not give it to him, I think a guy like Heineke could be perfect. And if he does start in Tampa, like I said, I think you could see that same exact chip on his shoulder. So I don't know how likely it is, but I wouldn't be opposed to it.
I agree on the narrative about Kyle Trask and bringing in some legitimate competition. And I think with a lot of these free agent guys, that's exactly what we're going to get the chance to see. And the more that we talk about it, I think the idea of riding with Kyle Trask and a veteran free agency is the most likely option for Tampa Bay. So I guess we'll kind of talk about it through that lens. But this coaching staff is really going to want to see what they have in Kyle Trask if he's going to stick around and take up a roster spot next year. So you're going to see some stiff competition from whoever they bring in during training camp, during OTAs, preseason, when they're both getting ample playing time. I don't know, depending on who they get, I don't know if this quarterback controversy is going to be all said and done by the first preseason game. Maybe by then we'll have a better idea, but you got 3 preseason games to go out there and prove it. And for Kyle Trask, it's obviously an uphill battle, but I do think he's going to be on the roster. The other potential free agent, everyone knows that this is my personal favorite. I mean, come on now. You can call me biased if you want to, but I don't even have a dog in the fight. Gardner Minshew. How about some Minshew mania hooking up with Canales in Tampa Bay? Now, I don't know. I mean, listen, I am a really big Minshew fan, so maybe this is just the inner mark kind of coming out here, but I don't know if that QB1 controversy is going to be quite as interesting with Minshew as it would be with a guy like Taylor Heineke, because I think depending on what happens, Kyle Trask could compete and push for that starting job against Heineke. I don't know if he does that against Minshew. And I know, you're shaking your head. I wish I could see your video right now. But yeah, dude, I don't know. What do you think of Gardner Minshew? He got in the game late for Philly. Jalen Hurts missed a couple of games, so we got a refreshed look at him. It obviously wasn't the greatest, but he was certainly out there helping that offense put up a lot of points.
Well, in the one game, the Dallas game he played well. The New Orleans game he was awful. The New Orleans game they barely put up any points. To say it was a low scoring game that the Eagles lost. And I'm not going to judge him on those two games. Like, sure, like that's not really fair to judge a guy on those two games. Okay, it's the same boat with Heineke. Because I think they are very similar. Minshew may have more upside, and I think
listen,
he does have more upside.
I'm a big Minshew mania mark, but I will tone it down and say that I think Heineke and Minshew are probably closer in skill than I would like to admit here. Sorry, I didn't mean to stomp on your point.
No, it's fine. I think Minshew has more upside than Heineke. Like, I think if you catch lightning in a bottle with Minshew, with like I think he's another guy that just the locker room likes him. Like, I just think he's another one of those guys that plays with a chip on his shoulder. And I think they are very similar. I think with the more upside, that Minshew does have more upside. But I don't know. I just think, and this may be the same thing with Heineke. There just may be some better options out there for not too much more money. And I think Minshew and Heineke are two of the more intriguing, least expensive options. I'm not saying a guy like Baker Mayfield's going to be overly expensive, but I think he's going to cost more than a Heineke or a Minshew. So in terms of Minshew, he didn't fit the previous offense at all. And that's what I'd always brought up to you. But now it's not the previous offense, and we have no idea what type of offense Dave Canales is going to run. But you imagine it's going to be a little bit different, and it may cater to whoever the quarterback is. So, like they may have talked about that in the interview. I'm sure that was a topic of discussion. Hey, do you like Kyle Trask? Okay. If you don't like Kyle Trask, here's a list of 5 free agent quarterbacks we were thinking of. What do you think of these guys? And I'm sure they've talked about a guy like Minshew. So it wouldn't shock me if he was a part of their plans. I think they could aim a little bit higher, but also like I would get it because I do think there's some upside there.
Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah, my favorite, honestly. Baker Mayfield's a close second now. I mean, I will say it's close, but Jacoby Brissett, I think, is the perfect balance of, honestly, man, he kept Cleveland in a lot of games last year, and their defense was not very good. I know the Browns have a good offensive line, a good running game, but he played pretty well, and he played well against the Bucs as well. And I'm not just basing it off of that, but I just think it's not going to cost you a ton. Is his upside as high as a guy like Mayfield or even Minshew? Probably not. Like I think he has the lower ceiling, but I think he has the highest floor. I think what you're getting with Jacoby Brissett.
Feels like a safer bet.
Yeah. He's got some sneaky mobility too. He's a bigger dude. Like he's a big guy, but he can get away. He can get away from some pass rushers and stuff. So I think that's important too. Tom Brady, all love Tom Brady, but that dude, he wasn't really avoiding rushers like crazy.
He was a dual threat. That when he had to bust out the wheels, he always could.
And when he had to, if there was a wide open lane, sure.
Yeah, but when there was nobody within 35 yards of him, then
yeah. But and I think that might be important. Like Minshew has a little bit of running ability. Heineke has a little bit of running ability. Jacoby Brissett, same thing. Even Baker Mayfield, same thing. So I think that could be important. And while like I said, the gap between Baker and Brissett has been, closer. It's been tightened. I still think that Jacoby Brissett. I don't know what you're laughing. I still think Jacoby Brissett gives them a pretty good shot to win, and so I like to take the chance on a guy. He's not going to put up a ton of flashy plays and everything, but he's going to do his job enough. And all jokes aside, I think that Jacoby Brissett has really got a tight grip on the quarterback race here. Maybe.
Are there any other free agent quarterbacks that we didn't mention? Derek Carr, Teddy Two Gloves obviously come to mind. I think Teddy Two Gloves, his time has probably come. But are there any other names that I failed to mention that maybe have been weighing on your mind as who could be competing for that QB1 spot for Tampa Bay in 2023?
Well, I'll tell you who I don't think it will be. It's not going to be Sam Darnold. Okay,
like, and it's
Todd Bowles is not going to bring Sam Darnold to the Bucs after Sam Darnold basically cost him his job. Like, no,
you seeing ghosts, man.
I know. It's not going to be Sam Darnold.
And just to kind of tack this on behind, it's certainly not going to be Jameis Winston.
No.
I didn't think we'd have to have this conversation once again, but a lot of people seem to think that a reunion between the former number 1 overall pick for Tampa Bay and of course the Buccaneers is something that could be in the works, and I'm here to tell you that it's next to impossible. Not even so much from the Bucs perspective, it's probably a Jameis thing. Like from everything that we have heard following his departure from Tampa Bay, I can't imagine any reason he would want to come back unless he was in like the twilight of his career. I cannot see a scenario where we see Jameis back in a Bucs uniform.
No. Another few things. Guys like Daniel Jones, I don't expect to go anywhere, and then of course Geno Smith, which obviously that is notable now because of Dave Canales. I just don't expect Geno to go anywhere, so I don't think that's very realistic. And also, even if he hits the market, Geno Smith's going to get a lot of money. Like, I don't think the Bucs could even – it's going to sound crazy. Like, imagine saying this, like, 2 years ago. Like, I don't think the Bucs are going to be able to afford Geno Smith. So, like, I really don't think I really, really don't expect Geno Smith, even though there is a connection there. But, I mean, there is – and Greg Allman brought him up, and everybody was – going crazy, but like a guy like Drew Lock, if you wanted to me, signing a guy like Drew Lock would signal like you think Trask is going to win the job, like because I would rather see Kyle Trask than Drew Lock in there. But
and let me ask you this. I guess this is a perfect segue into the final quarterback I wanted to talk to you about before maybe we potentially highlight some draft guys. What do you think if the Bucs just go ahead and roll with Kyle Trask? I mean, you're going to have to find out what he is at some point, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. It's another risk. I mean, they would be taking 2 big risks there, and a first time play caller, and basically a rookie quarterback, basically. I just don't know. And I'm fine if Trask wins the job out of camp, that's fine. But like, you got to give competition to him. He has no way earned that job. Like, he has not earned the quarterback 1 job. Like, he doesn't deserve it right now. If he goes into camp and beats the guy out with a better camp and a better preseason, sure. But like right now, what he's shown you is not enough to confidently say, yeah, he's the quarterback 1 right now. He's the quarterback 1 right now because he's the only one on the roster. But they're going to add multiple quarterbacks this offseason. So I don't think he has necessarily earned that. So if he goes out and he beats out his man, they sign a Taylor Heineke, a Gardner Minshew, Drew Lock, and he beats him out, sure. Sure, if you've earned it, go ahead. But I think he has to earn it first. And right now he's a complete unknown, man. Like, he is just a complete unknown. And I just don't know if Todd Bowles can afford to hitch his wagon to a guy like that.
Yeah, and I think the only way we see a scenario where Trask is your week 1 starter is obviously if he has played well enough to earn it, and the Bucs brought in some legitimate competition for him, and he obviously got the upper hand, which would give me higher hopes than I do right this very minute, honestly, in that context. If he plays well enough to beat out if he plays well enough to beat out a Drew Lock, I know Drew Lock isn't game-changing for anyone, but that is legitimate competition in the NFL as a backup quarterback. He has starter experience. You know what I mean? He's won some games, so it is what it is.
And G Vegas brings up that Locke could be the somebody to help transition to the system, dependent on how Canales views Locke, and for sure. And just to get this out of the way, I don't expect Blaine Gabbert to be back. I think they're going to move on. I mean, he's had 4 years with the team, surprisingly. So I don't think he'll be back. I don't know
he's
about
too busy
Ryan
saving
Griffin.
lives, man.
I know. Hey, props to him. But
He's actually going to be on the 3rd reboot of Baywatch, I heard.
Oh, nice. Well, I mean, he's got the airflow to do it. So, but yeah, I don't know about Ryan Griffin, so I don't know if he's going to be back. So I do think maybe a guy like Locke could be the Blaine Gabbert, and depending on how expensive he is, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But there's no top flight options, and but we listed a lot of guys there. Like we listed a lot of guys, and they're each a little bit different. So, in different scenarios and stuff. So I think one way or another, though, I do want to say I do expect a veteran to be under center for this team week 1. I don't think it's going to be Kyle Trask. I think it's going to be probably one of those guys that we listed. So, yeah. And then Buck Skull Gang says, "How about Justin Fields trade?" I don't think the Bears are train Justin Fields. I think they're just going to be smart about it, and they're going to move back from number 1, get a bunch of picks, and draft somebody on their defense. I don't think they're moving on from Fields. If they are, sure, I'll be at the top of that line. I'll be right in the front. But yeah, I don't expect that. So,
all right. 2 more names I want to ask you about, and I guess we can kind of cross out one of them. So I'm going to skip the Aaron Rodgers part of this conversation before we talk about some potential draft guys for Tampa Bay. This one is probably the least likely of the free agent quarterbacks that we have listed. Obviously, because of his asking price, I think it's just going to be way too much for Tampa Bay. But is there any scenario at all where the Bucs come away from this offseason with Derek Carr as their starting quarterback?
There is. I think there is. As a likely, no, but there is a scenario. Look, I mean, I think John Ledyard, I think on Twitter, kind of said it best. The Bucs can absolutely afford Carr. They can afford any free agent they want. If they were in deep discussions with Lamar Jackson, they can afford Lamar Jackson. It just all depends on how far they were willing to kick that can down the road. And is Derek Carr worth it? That's the thing. I don't know if 3 or 4 years of Derek Carr is worth the cap ramifications that it's going to matter. That's going to matter in 2-3 years. Is having Derek Carr on your team worth losing an Antoine Winfield? I don't know. Is he that good? Like Lamar Jackson, I think that's one thing. But is Derek Carr that good? He's a good quarterback. Is he a great one? Probably not. So I think that's what you have to balance. I don't think it's impossible. I just don't think it's likely. So, yeah, I really wouldn't expect Derek Carr to be there. Aaron Rodgers, not going to happen.
There's less of a chance of Aaron Rodgers than there is Derek Carr, and that's simply because of an AFC, NFC thing. I mean, I think he's got more chance of getting shipped off to the Jets, just like they did to Brett Favre, than going to Tampa Bay. And the reason they shipped him off to the Jets is because they didn't want to send him to Tampa Bay. You know what I mean? I just don't see a scenario where Green Bay is going to willingly give Aaron Rodgers to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And my gut feeling still says if he goes anywhere, it's going to be Vegas. But I think he comes back with the Raiders, maybe restructures and tries to, comes back with the Packers, maybe restructures and tries to do something up there. I'm getting ahead of myself here. All right, couple of names that we missed. Our buddy Mikey reminding us. I just want to rapid fire these quarterbacks before we talk about the draft. Jordan Love from Green Bay. It has been said, especially the more towards the end of the 2022 season, we heard more and more from his agent and everyone else that he wants to play. He is ready to play. And, this is a guy who didn't have the greatest reputation when he was drafted over his rookie season. We saw him a little bit, and he didn't look too bad. But what do you make of Jordan Love?
Yeah, and obviously in this scenario, Aaron Rodgers is staying in Green Bay because I think if Aaron Rodgers moves on, I think that just means that Jordan Love's the quarterback. I think that's what that would mean. So I am very intrigued because I liked Jordan Love pre-draft. I thought he had a lot of tools. I really thought he had a lot of the tools that you wanted in a quarterback. I thought he was a very raw prospect. He was going to take a little bit of time, and he has taken a little bit of time. And you say, when he got drafted, a lot of people had a lot of things to say, and I I always felt bad for him because he didn't ask to be put in the situation that he was put in.
Yeah.
He did not ask for that. The Packers made that decision and they put that on him. And so I think, yeah, if Rodgers, which I still think he's staying in Green Bay, but if Rodgers stays in Green Bay, like I think he will, yeah, I could see Jordan Love being an option, and I wouldn't hate it either. I don't know what the asking price would be. Unfortunately, the sweet spot for an asking price would probably be what the Bucs don't have, and that's a fourth round pick. Like I don't know if I'd want to give up a third, maybe a third next year. I don't know about this year, but yeah, the Bucs don't have their fourth this year, so I would maybe try and offer like my fifth this year and like a third next year or something. I don't know. But I would be intrigued, and I would certainly be intrigued. And I think that's a guy who, if he hits, that can be your franchise quarterback for the next 7, 8, 9 years. So I am very intrigued by the possibility of Jordan Love.
Another backup quarterback from the NFC East. He was able to win quite a few games with the Cowboys and looked serviceable doing so. That is Cooper Rush. Could he be a potential option for Tampa Bay?
He's interesting because he's not young. Like I believe he's 29. Yeah, he's not young, and he's obviously playing behind Dak Prescott. He's I think a safe option, but I also think he's someone maybe Kyle Trask could even beat out in camp. Like, I think I wouldn't hate him. I just think there's better options out there. I would rather go get a Heineke or a Minshew or Brissett Baker, like those types of guys over a guy like Cooper Rush. He has won a lot of games. I mean, Dak, went out against the Bucs week 1 there, and then everybody's like, "Oh, Dallas is done." And then Cooper Rush came in and he went 3-1 as a starter or 4-1 as a starter. So really kept them alive. And then Dak came back. So and his only loss was against Philly in Philly. And I mean, Philly was just ridiculous this year. So I do think he could be an option, an under the radar option that I don't think a ton of people are discussing. But I would personally aim a bit higher.
All right, this guy is not a free agent, if I'm not mistaken. You can correct me if I'm wrong here, but he was mentioned in chat.
He's
that
not.
is 49ers quarterback Trey Lance. Good God, words are hard. Bucs would have to figure out a trade for him, right?
Yes, he is. He's not a free agent. And with Brock Purdy's injury, I think this shoots down any possibility of that. Brock Purdy's going to miss about 6 months. It's the same injury that Bryce Harper had for the Phillies with
boy.
I know with like the UCL. Harper was able to come back after about 2 months, but he couldn't play the field because he couldn't throw. So obviously Brock Purdy is gonna not be able to throw for a little while. So I don't think the 49ers are going to be trading Trey Lance. If they are, I am intrigued. I was very, very high on Trey Lance pre-draft. I thought the 49ers made an excellent decision. And I wouldn't hate it. I just think that at this point, with Purdy's injury and all the uncertainty there, I would expect the 49ers to probably hold on to Lance for now.
All right. Let's wrap things up with some potential draft options for Tampa Bay. While we can both probably agree that a veteran on a cheap deal is going to be the most likely option, you can obviously never rule out the Bucs looking at something in the draft. If March comes and goes in free agency, the Bucs haven't really brought in what seems to be a serious quarterback with the 19th pick in the draft or anything else. If they decide to move around, they could take one of these guys. Now, I don't want to highlight every single college quarterback because the fact of the matter is, the Bucs aren't going to have a fair shot at a lot of these guys, but a few of them that were on my mind I wanted to mention, and then of course any on your list we could possibly talk about as well. First and foremost, this is probably the one that I like of the list. University of Kentucky quarterback Will Levis. What do you think of that in the red and pewter?
I'll tell you, he is going to be the boomer bust player. Is like immediately, I think. Like Anthony Richardson, and we'll get into him. I think he's like the real boomer bust player, but that's going to take time. I think Will Levis pretty much right away. He's either going to be great right away, like one of these rookie quarterbacks that just comes right out of the gate and shines, or it's going to be pretty ugly. And I don't know if there's in between there. I like the tools, and a lot of NFL teams are going to like the tools, the leadership ability, everything like that. But at the same time, a lot of the tape doesn't back it up. So he's just been very inconsistent. And personally, I still think he'd be worth drafting in the first round, but he's my quarterback 4. So if he's there at 19, that's one thing. I would not be trading up for that type of guy. If he's there at 19, I would strongly consider it. I think that's worth the risk. But I don't know if giving up future assets would be worth it to acquire a guy like that.
Hendon Hooker from Tennessee.
Yeah, this one kind of sucks because like if he was healthy, I'd be all aboard. There's 2 things that are really going against him right now. One, the torn ACL. That's going against them pretty hard. The other, he's 25 years old. Like the 25-year-old rookie is a tough pill for me to swallow. Like and that's at any position, but most importantly, quarterback. I don't love, like, I mean, Brandon Weeden got drafted when he was 28. Like, and obviously I know that's different, but like a 25-year-old rookie, like, man, I understand. And maybe this dude, okay, he might not have a lot of developing to do. Maybe he's already pretty much developed. Okay. But like, what's his prime going to be? Like 3 or 4 years? Like, I just, assuming he's not going to start this year because of the injury and the learning curve in the NFL. Okay, so now he's starting next year when he's 26. Let's say he needs a year or 2 of development. By the time he's 27 or 28 is when you finally get him. And then he's going to be good for what, 4 or 5 years and then done? Like, I don't know. Now, I mean, if he's available in the second round, maybe. I think if it weren't for the injury, he'd be a first rounder. But if he's available in the second round, maybe. I think he's going to go in the second round, but I think it's going to be before Tampa's pick. So I do think I'm intrigued by him, but there's significant drawbacks there.
Now, you had mentioned Hooker is maybe one of the quarterback prospects who could fall in the draft later than people expect. Here's another guy that I think could fall farther than a lot of people expect. And listen, this is coming from a Gators fan of all people, but that is Anthony Richardson, number 15 quarterback from the University of Florida, coming off of a pretty interesting final season with the Gators before declaring for the draft. I mean, week 1 of college football after that win, everybody was ready to call him a Heisman candidate. By the end of the year, everybody had seemingly forgotten about him with Billy Napier's first year as the head coach of the Gators. This one seems kind of open and shut, but there's obviously a lot of Florida homers. There's a lot of Florida State homers who are going to have a lot of bad things to say about him and Kyle Trask. But I just really cannot see a scenario where the Bucs pick up another young Gators quarterback, especially a guy that is even more of a raw player than what Kyle Trask seems to bring to the table. But what are your thoughts on potentially Anthony Richardson in Tampa Bay? He does obviously bring, a little more variety to the position, but, Canales is going to have his hands full regardless. What do you think of, Anthony Richardson potentially ending up in Tampa Bay?
Yeah, and like I said, he is the guy that I think he is either going to be like the next level version of Cam Newton, or he's going to be bad. Like he's going to flame out. It's not going to be pretty. Again, you're going to have to probably trade up for him. He's my quarterback 3. I love the tools. It's just, again, sometimes that tape wows you, and other times you're like, what is this guy doing? He's a younger dude, hasn't had as much experience. I mean, the athletic ability is just, it's off the charts. Really, I mean, for today's NFL, he is everything you want. I mean, everything. Strong arm, fast, athletic. He's got good touch. It just sometimes the decision making and sometimes that accuracy and touch isn't always there. And when it's not there, it's not like small misses. It's ugly misses. So he is going to be a project. I think this is a guy who is going to take a year, maybe two, to really develop into what he's going to be. You're probably going to have to trade up for him. And again, I just don't know if that's worth it. At 19, I would be intrigued, but I just don't know if trading up for a guy like that is worth it. If I'm trading up, I want to make sure that I'm moving up for, my guy. I'm moving up for a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud, which, the Buccaneers don't have enough ammo to move up that high. So.
And I think the context is also important here. Someone who has a lot of say-so in the final say-so of a decision like moving up in the draft would be Jason Light. If you are Jason Light and the Bucs organization, the fans, they all watch you trade up for a guy in the first round of the 23 draft following the Tom Brady era, I mean, that's the last. It could potentially be the last quarterback of Jason Light's Buccaneer tenure. Am I right? I mean, that's not only is it a big risk with a fresh team and a fresh coaching staff the way that it is now, but like Jason Light could be could be under even more fire at the end of the year, depending on how not only that guy plays, but the season goes for Todd Bowles and the rest of this coaching staff. I mean, that's basically, Jason Light just putting it all out on the table, right?
Yeah, here's an interesting thing for me. Todd Bowles is one thing. If you draft a quarterback, though, I think that might buy Jason Light more time, especially if it's a guy like Anthony Richardson. Because if you draft Anthony Richardson and he doesn't start, let's say it's either Kyle Trask or let's say it's a Baker Mayfield, Jacoby Brissett, Jason Light can just go to the Glazers if the Bucs only win 5 games and say, look, like we have this guy, like we have our first round quarterback, we have our franchise guy, need to give him time to develop. That may buy Jason another year or two.
This is oddly specific, but in the scenario that he does trade up, I mean, what happens if you, well, never mind, because I guess the Packers already answered that question. I was going to say, what happens if you trade up for a guy and he doesn't start?
Yeah. I mean, it's, I don't think it's the end of the world, but like, and I like what the Packers, I like the idea that the Packers had. I do. I like that idea. I just think it was horrible timing. I mean, Rodgers had given no indication that he was done playing. He was still playing at an extremely high level. And I mean, he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. It's not like it's the Chiefs with Alex Smith and then they draft Patrick Mahomes. Aaron Rodgers was one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And it's not like he said, oh yeah, this is my last year. I'm only going to play 2 more years. He'd given no indication of that. I like the idea that the Packers had. They just did it wrong. So I think the Bucs drafting a guy like Anthony Richardson, or even Will Levis, even though I would probably start Will Levis right away. But since we're talking about not starting, I'll just go with Richardson here. And then having a Jacoby Brissett or a Kyle Trask be the guy, I think is intriguing. And I mean, man, like, if you aren't good again, like, let's say you start Kyle Trask, and let's say that doesn't go too well, and you compare. Anthony Richardson sits there and he's ready next year. And let's say you do fire Todd Bowles. The Buccaneers had some difficulty finding an offensive coordinator this year. I think what you're going to see if they would have Anthony Richardson is a lot of head coaching opportunities come to Tampa Bay because people are going to be intrigued. And if you have a top 10 pick and you also have this electric quarterback, that's intriguing for a lot of people. So, but to cap this off, I don't think it's likely at all that they're going to be moving up because they're at 19. To get Anthony Richardson or Will Levis, they probably have to move to get their choice of the 2. They have to move to probably 6, which is Detroit. That's 13 picks. That is a lot of picks. You're talking about giving up your first rounder next year, so you wouldn't have a 2024 first rounder. So, and then probably either your second or third this year and maybe a pick next year. I don't, and it's for a Will Levis or an Anthony Richardson. I don't think that's worth it. I would much rather keep my picks, okay, go into the draft, make my selections, and then next year, if you're in a position, if you're sitting at 15th overall and you want to get to 3 to draft a quarterback, okay, maybe make that move then. But I think this is just not the year to do it quite yet.
All right, so to wrap this thing up, for the people asking, when it is all said and done, what do you think happens week 1 for Tampa Bay? What do you think the battle plan is at the quarterback position? I'll tell you mine. I think the most likely route is they sign a veteran. That's it. You're going to see a guy come in, probably a cheaper free agent that's available, not a lot of strings attached there, and you're going to see him compete with Kyle Trask, whoever gets QB1. Maybe we see them both start at some point in the regular season, but I think they're going to bring in some legitimate competition for Kyle Trask. And speaking of legitimate competition, shout out to our guy, Matt Diaz, with the $5 super chat. Says, let's go. Much appreciated, Matt. Thank you, buddy, so much. But what do you think, Evan? When it's all said and done, what are the Bucs going to have starting at quarterback next year?
Yeah, I do think it's a veteran. And if we're gonna get specific, since normally I don't get too specific, I don't have any sources on this or anything, but I think it's going to be Jacoby Brissett or Baker Mayfield. So I think it's going to be one of those two guys. Like I said, I'm a lot more intrigued by Baker now that Canales is the hire. We'll see. I do expect it to be a veteran. Yeah, and like you said, wouldn't shock me if Kyle Trask gets playing time at some point in the season. I just think when we're talking about week 1, who's taking the first snap for the Buccaneers of the 2023 season, I think it's a veteran. So I think Todd Bowles knows that he needs to at least be respectable and win games. He doesn't have to win 10 games probably. I think the Glazers see, what's, sort of a transition year, but 4 or 5 wins probably isn't going to cut it. So, I think he needs to win a decent amount of games to keep his job. So, I think they're going to go out and do that. One name, and this isn't a quarterback, one name I just wanted to throw out there as a free agent because I want to get out there in front of everybody else. I tweeted out last night. One name that really makes sense to me as a free agent for the Bucs now that Canales is the hire is running back Rashad Penny. And I was I
said the same thing this week as soon as I found out about Canales, man.
A massive fan of Penny pre-draft. I mean, I was huge on him.
We were singing his praises on this very podcast the year of that draft.
Yeah. So I think it can make a lot of sense. I don't expect, and we'll talk about what moves, and because they're $55 million over the cap, folks, and they have to be cap compliant. So cuts are coming, restructures are coming, and will Leonard Fournette be on the team? I doubt it. If Leonard Fournette is not back, I think signing a guy, like Rashad Penny, to pair him with Rachaad White, to have the 2 Rashads, right? And then drafting a running back in the 5th or 6th round, I think would really balance out your free agent your free agent class and your running back room. So
you're telling me right now, Evan Wanish, that you would trust a 5th or 6th round running back more than you would trust your guy Keyshawn Vaughn? That's your boy Sneak. That's your boy. Yeah. I mean, come on. How could you do him like that? You were the biggest Keyshawn Vaughn fan on the show.
On the show, there's only 2 of us, so he might not even make the team. I don't know. And then Mikey says, what date should we expect these cuts? I would say end of February, early March. Yeah, I think it's coming sooner rather than later, but I don't think it's imminent. So, and yes, you're right, David. Penny was highly liked by the Buccaneers. When they drafted him, and rarely even that's a good one. So yes, the Buccaneers did like Penny. Now I'm not sure if that was the whole front office, if that was the coaching staff at the time. Obviously, different coaching staff now. So, but I do think he makes a lot of sense.
We'll obviously talk to you guys a lot more about what the Bucs have to do to get back to being cap compliant on the next podcast. One little bit of coaching news I wanted to leave you with. Forgot to mention it at the start of the show, but just another minor update. Seahawks GM John Schneider said on Seattle Sports that Brad Idzik, previously Seattle's assistant wide receiver coach, will join Dave Canales in Tampa Bay as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers' new wide receivers coach. So welcome to Tampa Bay, Brad Idzik, as we get excited about what Canales and this new offensive scheme can bring to the table. There's going to be some changes, and hopefully we see some changes for the better. But ladies and gentlemen, with all of that being said, that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. Everyone in the live chat over here on YouTube, Rarely Even, Malcolm Hawthorne, G Vegas, Corey Fleming, Buck Skull Gang, David, Mikey, our buddy Matt Diaz with the $5 super chat, and anyone else we may have missed. We truly do appreciate you guys supporting the show as always. Go find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And, of course, Tampa Bay Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_daily. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL. And check out his written work at BucsNation.com. You got anything in the hopper here over the next few weeks?
Yeah, just a little sneak peek. See, it always comes up. Can't
get him off of your mind. That's your guy,
I know.
Man. I know you're tore up about him potentially not making the team.
I know. Well, Rarely Even also said playoff Penny. So that would be, instead of playoff Lenny, playoff Penny. G Vegas, way to make my Friday morning. Well, we appreciate you spending your Friday morning with us. So,
also just a cool bit from Really Even here. Brad Idzik's dad, John, spent 12 years as a Bucs executive. So a bit of a reunion there.
Yeah, for sure. And just in the hopper, I got a little preview. I haven't really teased it much, but I'm just going to be highlighting why I think the Buccaneers should avoid Jimmy Garoppolo. So I don't think it's likely, but I'm just going to highlight why, some of the reasons I think it'd be smart to sort of avoid going that route.
And it has certainly been reported that the Bucs could have interest, with the quote being they want to retool while staying competitive. So we'll keep you guys updated with everything Buccaneers as we know more, from the quarterback position to some of the cuts that are going to be along the way. Keep it locked right here for more Tampa Bay Buccaneer news. But that's going to do it for this week's episode. I am your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off for my co-host, Evan Wanish. We'll talk to you guys sometime next week. We'll keep you updated on everything Red and Pewter between now and then. We'll talk to you in the next one. Thank you again for watching. Sorry, I always kind of break down here at the end of the show. Words are hard. Thank you guys for watching. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon. Until then, and as always, go Bucs.